DA leader Mmusi Maimane is expected to address the media at 3 p.m. at Nkululeko House in Johannesburg. The party's Federal Executive Committee is meeting following the weekend election of Helen Zille as Federal Council Chair, which led to the resignation of Johannesburg Mayor Herman Mashaba.
While the spotlight is on Mashaba, there is speculation that Maimane's future will also be discussed. Maimane was present at Mashaba's resignation briefing, where the outgoing mayor slammed the DA, accusing it of having been taken over by right-wing elements. Let's get some more on the story now. We're across to our reporter Natasha Phiri, who's standing by in Johannesburg. Very good afternoon to Natasha. There was postponement of that briefing. We were expecting to start at 1 o'clock. It's now expected for 3 p.m. What's happening?
Indeed, Nzinga, of course, unfortunately we'll have to wait 2 more hours longer to actually wait for Mmusi Maimane to actually brief journalists, and the news just coming in there at around 12:35 that the briefing indeed has been postponed. But I mean, what does this now mean? We wonder what's actually going on inside. Just to actually talk us through these processes, I'm joined by Professor Ivor Sarakinski. I hope I pronounce your surname well, and he's from the Wits School of Governance. Thank you so much for joining us. Prof, what do we now, how could you actually interpret this? The briefing has been delayed by 2 more hours.
When these kinds of things happen in politics, it's usually suggestive of major backroom horse trading. So something's going on behind the scenes, and I suspect that there are two dimensions to this. Meetings with the DA establishment to find a way to last minute reconcile, and if it can't be done, to find a credible damage control divorce and announce that publicly to limit the damage, so damage control that. And I think the other leg of the discussions that Mr. Maimane will be having will be with his supporters in the DA, who are indicating that should he resign and leave, they may well follow. And that means that the DA faces a serious problem of a splinter group leaving the DA, and that opens up all kinds of possibilities about a future party. The divorce from Herman Mashaba at the previous press conference was very, very strident, and I suspect that this delay is indicative of the high emotions and the high stakes behind this press conference.
Prof, you actually highlighted on something, a split within the DA. There's now this notion, a perception that, there are 2 factions within the DA. You've got the old guard versus the new guard. How do you actually see this play out, and what does this actually mean for, the opposition, biggest opposition party in South Africa?
I suspect there are more than 2 factions in the DA, and even the factions that exist, I don't think can be categorized as old guard, new guard. I don't think they can be categorized accurately at all in terms of black-white either. I think that if we look at the groupings, they include black and white people across the board. For Helen Zille to have won that election, she had to have got votes from black DA members. There's no way she could have won it without that. At the same time, white people were supporting Mmusi Maimane's camp in the DA. So it's not simply a racial thing. It's an ideological thing. It's a policy thing. It's a leadership thing. And you've got loose alliances forming as people try and address their particular issues and pressures. And I guess the key problem here is policy and policy ambiguity and a policy vacuum, and that has led to the DA losing momentum in terms of voter support.
Prof, the final recommendations of the organizational review report cite that Mmusi Maimane should step down. We saw James Self stepping down, Paul Bowie as well. Do we think, or do you actually think that come 3 o'clock, Mmusi Maimane will step down, given the fact that, he's got the backing of provincial leaders within the party?
It depends what he's going to step down from. So it's more complicated than just step down. He can step down as DA leader, and he can hold his seat in Parliament. And he could be appointed as a shadow minister. Difficult emotionally for him to do that, because he's going to have to then, as former leader, take instructions from the new leader or the new interim leader team. So that will be difficult for him. He could resign from Parliament and the DA. or just resign from Parliament and hold his DA membership but not be a public office bearer. Or he could do as Mr. Mashaba did, which is resign from the DA completely. So we're waiting to see the nuances that are going to come out of the announcement in terms of which one of those resignations or stepping downs it is.
And if he indeed does step down, party insiders say that the current federal chairperson, Ethel Chollop, will actually take over the reins until next year, the elective Congress in 2020.
Well, the DA constitution will set out rules in terms of what happens if the current leader resigns or stands down or something happens to the current leader, and then you'll have a simple constitutional process in terms of the DA's rules on what happens next. And good luck to whoever takes the reins should Mr. Maimane resign. Because in politics, leaders come and go, the problems stay. The problems don't go away just because a leader resigns.
Definitely. I mean, in light of Herman Mashaba's departure now as Johannesburg mayor, I mean, does the future of Johannesburg actually lie in the balance, seeing the agreement between the EFF and the DA? Again, I'll take you through the organizational report. The recommendations cite that for the DA to actually go in partnership, I won't say coalition, but in partnership with the EFF was a huge mistake. I mean, what do you make now of these new revelations?
Nothing really new there. The collaboration with the EFF certainly damaged the DA's reputation and standing in many communities, not just white communities, because of the controversies and style of politics of the EFF. So one understands that recommendation quite clearly. What it means now for Johannesburg is that the DA can nominate an existing councillor to stand for election in the council as mayor. And they're going to have to caucus the numbers in council for that. 50 plus 1 in terms of the quorum, and they might be able to get a DA mayor. But of course now the ANC is going to be lobbying and caucusing as well. And it comes down to the numbers in council as to who the next mayor is going to be.
And the DA don't have numbers.
They don't have numbers. The EFF has said they won't vote for the DA because of a spat at another level of politics, which means that the ANC, if they can get the IFP, one or two of the smaller parties on board, they might be able to get the mayorship. And in a sense, where we are now in Johannesburg is the morning after the 2016 election in terms of coalition politics. That's exactly where we are now.
Quite interesting analysis. Thank you so much, Paul, for your time. Let me not keep you. Of course, that was Professor Ivor Skavinsky from the Wits School of Governance, giving us quite interesting analysis in regards to the story. Very important, might I add. And of course, we're counting down now to 3 o'clock, where that much anticipated and important briefing will take place, where party leader Mmusi Maimane will then brief the media. Is this the end for him? We'll just have to wait and see until then. As for me, here in Bruma, it's back to you in studio, Nzinga.
Thanks, Natasha. Let's carry on following this story. For more on this, I'm joined in studio by political analyst Gogo Aubrey Matshiqi. Tokoza Gogo, thanks so much for your time on SABC News this afternoon. We're seeing this postponement of that election, of that announcement from 1 o'clock until 3 o'clock. Lots of behind the scenes probably happening. What do you think the outcome will be?
Well, let's look at what was the intended timing of the press briefing by Mmusi Maimane. It was scheduled for 1 o'clock. On the same day on which the federal executive was to have its own meeting to discuss, amongst other things, the report of the review panel, and secondly, the resignation of Herman Mashaba as mayor of Johannesburg. I suspect what Maimane intended doing was to announce his departure. Probably as leader of the DA, because that's the only thing that matters as far as his departure is concerned, and do so before the federal executive goes deep into discussions about the state of the party and other issues. The fact that the presser has been postponed to 3 o'clock suggests that there are still lots of meetings taking place. Meetings about if he intended to resign, dissuading him from resigning. And you can be certain that it is not a case of meetings with a single block of DA leaders and members. I think there are multiple meetings taking place, but I think the imperative would be to try and dissuade him from resigning as leader of the party, simply because that would deepen the internal crisis in the DA even further.
Can we read anything into the newly elected Fed chair, Helen Zille, tweeting poetry about enemies and the kind of flurry that seems to be taking place on social media around what Mmusi Maimane may do?
Well, one of the things you can read about their tweets is an air of triumphalism. Now, when we look at the ascendance of Helen Zille as Federal Council Chair, this is not just the election of an individual to a position. This is about the interests she brings to that position. This is also about the internal conflicts that have been going on in the party for at least the past 3 years. This is about how these conflicts are configured and how she is positioned herself in those conflicts. And the fact that she was elected Federal Council Chair suggests to me that the vote for her was a proxy vote against Maimane. In other words, the election for Federal Council Chair in some ways must be seen as a referendum against the leadership of Mmusi Maimane.
I know that at this stage it's just speculation and we will not know until after 3 o'clock what will happen, whether he will resign or not. If he does resign, do we know what direction the DA could be taking?
Well, let's take a step back. Let's start in 1999. The task that was facing the leader of what was then the Democratic Party in 1999, the task that was facing Tony Leon, was that of dislodging the new National Party as the official opposition of the country. And in order to do so, he had to create a new majority of white voters for the Democratic Party, and he succeeded. And that is how in 1999, the Democratic Party, the precursor to the DA, becomes the official opposition of the country. Come the period of Helen Zille's leadership, at the beginning of that process, Helen Zille is faced with the task of creating another majority, that of reaching out to black voters or black people to be both members of the party and be a voting bloc that will improve the performance of the DA in electoral terms. This she had to do because the DA had reached a ceiling of support amongst white voters. And the only way it would grow further would be if it succeeded in attracting a sizable number of black people as members, but more importantly, a sizable number of black people as voters. Now, there's an irony here. She succeeded spectacularly in doing that and in how she positioned the DA as a party that would be attractive to certain portions of the black electorate. With her election as Federal Council Chair, she is in the process of undermining that. That is the irony. But what it suggests to me is that she may have succeeded not only in attracting black people to vote for the DA, but she may also have succeeded, and therefore the DA itself may have succeeded in misrepresenting itself to black voters. In other words, black voters became nothing more than a means to an end.
Thanks so much for your time on SABC News this afternoon. Gogo Aubrey Matshiqi joining us there on the future of the DA and what could happen if Mmusi Maimane resigns this afternoon. Of course, we are going to follow that story very closely and keep you updated as information comes in. Nompo, it's over to you.